Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to join this Asian Financial Forum and to discuss some of the extraordinary challenges of our time. The title of our session is about navigating the next normal. And when I started thinking about the questions that this panel raises, I was thinking, well, if we are going to cruise a next normal, what was the old normal? What have been the different ecosystems in terms of the framework within which economic agents had to operate? And I think it would be fair to say that by the fall of the Berlin Wall, all the way to the Great Recession, so basically from 1989 all the way to 2008, the prevailing normal was a sense of deep globalization, a consensus around the fact that more international trade, more investment flows, less barriers to exports and imports, less obstacles to foreign direct investment, liberalization of capital markets were actually very good things. Regional economic integration, moving on to regional political and legal integration seemed to be on the rise. That is to say that this world of deep globalization that sort of prevailed over almost 2 decades was the dominant feature of how nations and companies would use their GPSs to position themselves vis-a-vis the future. The fact is that this prevailing normal from the fall of the Berlin Wall all the way to 2008 has been challenged now for quite some time. Following the 2008 Great Recession all the way to the emergence of this pandemic, we have very clearly left the normal in which you would find this deep globalization trades, and we've been under the risk of deglobalization. So global GDP expanding at a faster rate, although at a very unsatisfactory rate than the exchange of goods and services. So less trade as a percentage of global GDP, more restrictions to international investment, less speed and less depth when it comes to regional economic and political integration. So as a consequence of this prevailing normal that we've had since 2008, the fact is the global economy has underperformed. So if we are moving towards a new normal, this recent normal that we are just, say, departing from was actually not that great in terms of bringing prosperity and opportunities to all. Now, if we're looking towards the future and we're going to devise, say, the most important defining lines of what the next normal is going to be, I think there are trends there that are absolutely strong and that will continue with us for a long time. So the first one that I would like to accentuate is that although emerging economies have many challenges when it comes to their fiscal situation, to inflation, to, of course, obtaining resources for their continued investment in infrastructure, it is true, however, that emerging economies represent a bigger and bigger slice of the global GDP pie. The E7, for example, the biggest emerging economies of the world, so China, India, Russia, Indonesia, Brazil, Mexico, Turkey, now have a combined gross domestic product measured at purchasing power parity terms of about $53 trillion. So that's 25% bigger than the traditional G7. The E10, the biggest emerging economies of the world, have a combined GDP measured at purchasing power parity terms that's nearing $60 trillion in 2021. So that is going to lead, as I see it, to the second trend that will help define what the next normal is going to be, which is the redefinition, the rerouting, the reconfiguration of global value chains. This is a phenomenon that's much broader. It's much more comprehensive than just redrafting global supply chains. Because yes, supply is very important, and supply is being affected by geopolitics somehow. But there are other factors that are perhaps even stronger in defining those supply chains. For example, the evolution of some of the most important, some of the weightiest economies of the world. China, for example, is no longer a low-cost country. China is leading in the world in some of the most important and advanced technologies out there. It's increasing the value addition of its production. So it only natural that it embarks more and more on a few sectors, and it leaves some other sectors aside. That has a major impact on global supply chains. But as the phenomenon is broader, as I mentioned, I'm also talking here about new chains of export and import. A country like Brazil, for example, where I'm from, today exports much more to Malaysia than it does to France, much more to Singapore than it does to Germany, much more to Thailand than it does to Italy. And these exchanges with this emerging economies is only going to grow over time. A third characteristic of this next normal that we are going to live with in the next couple of years has to do, and I think this was very well captured by some of the interventions here, for example, by the Honorable Minister of Finance of Thailand and also by the President of AIIB, Mr. Lee Joo-chung, which is the metamorphosis of infrastructure is here. We're talking not only about traditional physical infrastructure, but we're talking about a bigger scope for social infrastructure investment, for example, that will help us have the early warning systems to respond actively, accurately, and efficiently to the spread of a new pandemic. Infrastructure that is related to the fourth industrial revolution, in the sense that when you think of schools, you're not only talking about the physical buildings, but actually having the Wi-Fi connectivities that will allow students to have some sort of remote education in case in-person classes are not taking place. And you're also talking about the omnipresence of technology. So it's not like there is one sector of the economy which is digital infrastructure, and there's another one where it's traditional physical infrastructure. Everything is going to be embedded together, and we are going to have a bigger and bigger input of technology in how infrastructure projects are designed in the future. In this next normal, as it also has been said here, multilateral development institutions, and particularly multilateral banks, have a crucial role to play, not only because they are catalyzers of more investment, bringing in resources that are sitting out there, parked out there, and that could find a much more interesting use if they were directed to infrastructure investment, not only because multilateral development banks are at the forefront of discussing what the new development policies are going to be in the world to come, but also because they help to fight the global governance and the global cooperation gap. Multilateral institutions are a great hub for international cooperation at a moment in history where international cooperation is so much needed. The best news possible, my friends, going forward in terms of the next normal is that building the next normal is within our reach. It's not something that is determined by destiny, but it is in our hands to define what the next normal is going to be, and a next normal that brings about more prosperity for all. Thank you very much.